Hey guys, John here from Sonic Drive Studio. I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to do an interesting experiment, but to do this experiment we're either going to need to take the blue pill or the red pill. Which pill will you take? Are you ready to go into the Matrix? Or was it Inception? I'm not sure. I admit that the idea for this video is kind of silly, but at the same time I'm quite interested in seeing how this will go. So on the channel, I've done plenty of comparisons. I've compared amplifiers to other amplifiers, modeling platforms to amplifiers, modeling platforms to captures. But in today's video, I want to see if a modeler can model a modeler. So what I'm going to do is basically make a capture or a tone model of a digital model of an amplifier. And the digital amp that I want to model is one of my favorite digital amps or amps in the digital realm. And that is the DAS metal amplifier on the Fractal Audio FM3 Mark II Turbo. And this amp model sort of does not exist in real life, so it's kind of unique to the digital world. I believe that originally the DAS metal amp was based, sort of loosely based, on a schematic of a diesel amplifier, the VH4 I believe, and they added that model way before there were more accurate diesel models in the XFX. It doesn't sound like any diesel that I've heard in my life, but it does sound awesome. In fact, it's my go-to amplifier in the Fractal stuff for high gain tones. It's tight, it's aggressive, it's edgy and focused. It does all the right things and it works with any guitar basically. Now, one of the downsides of the Fractal gear is that you can't use the amp models in plug-in form, like Helix Native by Line 6, for example. You know, that allows you to do instant reamping in your DAW without having to run the audio back through your hardware. So for me, it would be nice to have a virtual amp model of the DAS metal amplifier in my DAW so I can reamp in an instant, basically. So what I'm going to do is make a tone model in IK Multimedia's Tonex platform. And while we're at it, I'm also going to make a neural capture with my Neural DSP Quad Cortex, just to see how that goes and how the virtual clones of the amplifier model compare. So in order to make the IK Multimedia Tonex tone model, I hooked the FM3 up into one of the loops of my Line 6 Helix rack, which is my preferred interface for making the Tonex tone models. Now the FM3 preset is very simple, just an input block, the amp block, a cabinet block, and an output block. And I want to clone just the amplifier by itself, so without the cabinet sound, because I want to be able to change the cabinet sound after the fact. So I turned off the noise gate and the cabinet block, and I went ahead and created the Tonex tone model. And of course, for the accuracy, I used the advanced mode, which I always use. It takes a little bit of time, but with my computer, it's definitely not bad, under 20 minutes. So the tone model was done, and now let's just go ahead and take a listen to a comparison of the real Fractal FM3 DAS metal amp model versus the Tonex tone model. And by the way, the guitar that I'm using here is my Gibson Les Paul Custom. And I'm using a Digitech Whammy 5-pedal at the end. And I'm also using the exact same OwnHammer impulse response across all the platforms loaded into the cabinet blocks of the devices themselves. And that is the high gain mix of my go-to OwnHammer IR pack for heavy music, which is the Low Tuned Essentials. Okay, let's go ahead and check it out right now. Very interesting, right? Sounded very, very close indeed. Quite impressive. By the way, I did level match all the files in this video, as I do with all my comparisons, just to make sure that the level is exactly the same. There is a very slight difference, but it's very, very subtle indeed. The Fractal does seem to have a little bit more of that organic sag going on, those sort of organic dynamics, or that compression, if you will. And the Tonex model has a little bit more focus on the mid-range, and perhaps the low-end response is a little bit more tight. But I'm really splitting hairs here because it sounds ridiculously close. So yeah, that was pretty cool, and I will now be able to use that favorite Fractal amp model in my DAW without having to reamp through the hardware, which is nice. Now let's go ahead and try the Neural DSP Quad Cortex. So I hooked up the FM3 into the Quad Cortex for making the capture. And luckily, the capture process on the Quad Cortex is much faster than with Tonex, so that's nice as well. And what I like about the captures in the Quad Cortex is that you can load as many capture blocks in a preset as you like, and also place them in the chain anywhere you'd like, so it's a really flexible platform in that regard. So now let's take a listen to a comparison of the real FM3 dust metal amp model versus the capture in the Quad Cortex. Take a listen. Wow, again, very, very close. Just as with Tonex, like really impressive. Yeah, what can I say? Perhaps just as with the Tonex model, the bottom end response is ever so slightly more tight on the Quad Cortex. But again, it's very subtle. It basically sounds like the same amp model. In any case, it's very impressive how accurately both Tonex and the Quad Cortex can capture a digital amp model. Sometimes with real amplifiers, there's a little bit of a difference, and the difference is a little bit less subtle. But for some reason in the digital realm, it sounds pretty darn close. And it's just handy for my own personal use because, like I said, now I can use the dust metal amplifier in a plugin in my DAW or use it in my Quad Cortex. Okay, finally, I want to do an A-B back-to-back comparison just with the guitars isolated throughout with the FM3 dust metal amp model versus the Tonex tone model versus the Neural DSP Quad Cortex capture. Let's check it out and take a listen. So my final thoughts, they all sound great. And yeah, they sound very close. And in a mix, nobody would probably be able to tell the difference. So that's really cool. I had a blast and I'm glad that I did this experiment, as I've been wanting to do this for a little while now. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Of course, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below because I'd love to know. Have you ever done this and what were your results? And of course, as always, please drop a like and subscribe down below as that really helps the channel out. I'd hugely appreciate that. And of course, you can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you guys so much and hope to see you soon. Cheers.